Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in partnership with our broadcast partner, Triax 57. I'm Joe Martucci. I'm here with Palma Shiles. Dan Skeldon could not be here today, but he will be back with us in due time. It is now officially past Memorial Day, and we are getting into what we like to call climatological summer. Palma, you live in a beach town. You're in Atlantic City. So how's it been going just into the brief infancy of the peak tourist summer season?
Well, I really did notice it going into work, into Margate on Friday before Memorial Day. That's when I really noticed a lot of traffic, and I think everyone pretty much lucked out with the weather. Did you expect it to be as good as it was with the weather? Because I kind of felt like it was going to be a lot cooler, and then it ended up being pretty nice.
I would like to say, unbiasedly, my forecast was pretty spot on. I knew it was going to be mostly dry. Friday was going to be the wettest day. I think, though, to your point, Palma, it's one of those things, and this happens, it's spring or early summer, whatever. But the air temperature might be 65, but when that sun's on you, it's cooking you. It feels warm in the sun. It doesn't really matter, what the temperature is. And if you go to somewhere like San Diego or somewhere where our next guest spent some time from in Southern California, he could probably also say there's those days where it's 65 degrees, but man, when that sun's on you, it feels warm. So I think that was like kind of what you were feeling this weekend. But yeah, it wasn't all bad. I graded Memorial Day weekend to C on our Shore Summer Weekend Weather Report Card. We're recording this on May 28th, so it looks like the first weekend in late May, early June, whatever you want to call it, looks to be about a B-ish. We'll see. But yeah, the sun's strong, and you don't look like you got burned, Palma. So you did well in the sun this weekend.
Well, although I don't look it, I am Italian, so I don't burn too easy.
Yeah, we should have said this was the Italian episode. Should have started out the Italian Stallion episode. Gary, I'll bring him in and I'll ask him if he's Italian. So we have our next guest here for this episode, Garrett Broad. He is an associate professor in communication studies and the provost fellow for sustainability at Rowan University. He graduated with his bachelor's degree from Rutgers University, just like me right here in Jersey. But then he went and got his PhD at the University of Southern California. Garrett, welcome to the show. And now you can answer, are you Italian in any way, shape, or form?
Actually, not Italian, although often people think I am Italian. I grew up in South Jersey. I can sort of speak I can say I know it's gravy in the stove and and a little gabagool, but actually not Italian. But and yes, and a Jersey guy. Even though I spent some time in Southern California, definitely this is the weather I grew up with around here.
Okay, all right, not bad. And when you were in LA, right? I mean, the sun was cooking you, even if it wasn't the hottest outside.
Yeah, I mean, the weather there. People say, oh, there's no seasons, there's no seasons. And that's true. It's pretty nice, though.
Yeah.
Although it really depends. LA has some really interesting microclimates.
Yes.
I lived for a little while on the east side of town, and that's where, it could get and in South LA, where I did a lot of work, University of Southern California, that's where you get major urban heat island effects, and that sun can really come down hard. On the coast, I moved and lived in Venice Beach for a couple of years, which was pretty nice as well.
Yeah.
And that's where you get that marine layer, through the morning. You get a couple hours of sun after 2, 3, 4 o'clock. And so it's a much milder climate. And so it really depends. LA, is not one thing, as with most places, but a lot of different, kind of weather and geographic differences across the area.
Yeah, you're totally right. And, a lot of people, will tell me, oh, I wish I could be a meteorologist in Southern California. It's the same weather there. I'm like, no, it's not. I said, it is very different from inland to the coast. I said, if you really want to, what's that? Oh, in the valley,
the valley, I mean, you're talking 10, you can have a 20-degree split between, Venice Beach and the valley, and with downtown LA, halfway in between. So yeah, there is actually a lot for a weather person to do.
It's easier in South Florida than Southern California. Let's put it that way. Anyway, I think right. So anyway, we're going to talk a lot this episode about sustainability, something obviously you're well versed in, but let's just get real elementary.
Hmm.
How would you define sustainability?
So sustainability is the idea of really this triple bottom line is usually how we think about it, right? Having an environmental, economic, and social system that provides for the present and the future in a way that can sustain over time. And so that it's that the real sustainability we look for is a social, economic, and environmental system that allows us to move forward in a way that is healthy and flourishing. But what we often find is some real challenges there, right? And so sometimes something that's really environmentally sustainable might not be super economically sustainable, or might have some challenges and trade-offs when it comes to the social system. But big picture, that's what we look for, how to have a healthy and thriving current and the future across those different elements.
Now, who are all the people, the groups that you work with to promote this, and who do you assist with learning more about this and really putting it out there?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm a faculty at Rowan University. I'm in communication studies. And I was actually hired a few years ago as part of a broader initiative at the university to try to bring more folks focused on sustainability issues across the university. So at Rowan, we do have a School of Earth and Environment that has an environmental science department and a geography, planning, and sustainability department. And we have, other sustainability work in engineering and even in places like mathematics and computer science. I came to bring sustainability to the School of Communication and Creative Arts. There were already some folks doing work there as well on sustainability issues. But basically what I do is, I teach, I do research on issues related to media, communication, social movements, the environment. I do a lot on food system issues as well. But in my role as provost fellow, a lot of what I try to do is kind of build those connections across the entire university, between faculty, between students, and also increasingly working with the folks in our facilities and our operations. I mean, we're a growing, big institution, lots of buildings, lots of energy use, lots of impacts on the local environment. And so we've got some really, dedicated folks in our facilities and operations that are trying to make that as sustainable as possible. And so one of the things I've also been doing lately is trying to bring them in to conversation with faculty, with students, so we can try to, collaborate and come up with ideas about how we can move sustainability forward across all those different domains.
Okay, and so how did you become interested in this? Because I think you had mentioned off camera that you kind of shifted gears in your studies, and what drove you in this direction?
Yeah, when I was an undergraduate, I was a political science major at Rutgers, and I actually took a semester abroad to the Netherlands, to a town called Leiden, an old university town. And I took a course with a faculty there who was a Dutch political theorist who wrote about ecological utopias. And I just kind of took it because it seemed interesting, it fit in my schedule, and it changed my life. And sort of from there on, that was kind of in my junior year of undergraduate, I said, hey, I really want to focus on these issues. I was really interested in the intersection of food and sustainability, and also how that connected to agriculture and land, and also the social and the economic aspects of things. But I wasn't an environmental scientist. And so I thought, okay, what can I do here that might draw from my skills? I had a background doing some student journalism and working in public television. I really liked talking and engaging and being a kind of public communicator. And so that's where I decided to, continue to pursue my studies in communication, which is a sort of interdisciplinary social science, humanistic study of communication, society, a mix of like sociology and psychology and a bunch of other things, and with the environment and food and things like climate change as my focus area. So yeah, I was able to kind of bring these different things together, and here I am building a career out of it. Not too bad.
And you managed to write a book as well, More Than Just Food. You can find it if you type in his name in More Than Just Food. We got like 60 more seconds left in this segment. You want to give a 60-second elevator pitch on that?
Sure. So that was a lot of work that I really did when I was at the University of Southern California, but also with connections to movements around the country, focused on groups that were using food as a tool for not just health, but also things like community economic development and local environmental action in a lot of low-income communities, what we often hear, called like food deserts or food swamps, those kinds of places. And so it tracked the work of local community-based organizations that were trying to, do things like urban agriculture and nutrition education and build local social enterprises to promote a healthier, more sustainable local food system, but also more healthy, sustainable people and community members. Yeah, so I've continued to do work on local food activism as I've come back to the New Jersey area, and also do a lot of other work related to kind of debates about the future of the environment, about policies, about the future of food and all those sorts of things.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into that and much more on Tidal Flooding Talk. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more. And we're here continuing our discussion with Dr. Garrett Broad here. Appreciate having him and chatting with us about sustainability. So you mentioned at the end of the last segment that you like to have these discussions about what the future of the environment looks like. Now, is there a way, just to put it bluntly, is there a way to discuss this in a non-political manner?
No.
No,
really.
and that's fine. I thought the answer was no,
Well,
but
I
maybe
mean,
you know.
there's a way we could, right? But generally, if you are engaging in conversations with people about some environmental issue, for most people, what that does is that activates something in their brain that connects them back to politics, and that actually messes things up. Because it would be great, and there's a lot of really interesting work from psychology and behavior and actually behavioral economics and other places like that to show when our political brain is activated, we don't reason very well, right? We end up going to these kind of shortcuts in our brain, right? So our brain is kind of split in two. We've got what we call like the automatic brain, and we've got the rational deliberative brain. And most of the times we're confronted with an issue or a decision to make, we go with our automatic brain because that's how we get through the day, right? If I had to think really closely about every decision I made in the grocery store, right? And I was looking at every ingredient label for 10 minutes, I wouldn't be able to get out of the grocery store, right? And so, but there are some issues where we go to that more deliberative brain, right? If I'm going to buy a car, right? Or I'm deciding where to send my kid to school, right? We take our time, right? We slow, and we really want to kind of calculate things in a close and deliberative manner. What happens with politics is we go to that automatic brain, right? And anytime that political brain is activated, we go, does this fit with my team or not? Most of us, not all of us, right? But that's the problem. And so you see so many of these issues in New Jersey, for instance, related to offshore wind development. I'll give an example. I've got a great colleague named Allison Novak at Rowan, who's been studying these debates around offshore wind for the last several years. And there's a number of reasonable arguments on all sides of this debate around offshore wind, but it's gotten so mixed up with our politics that basically where you are on the political spectrum tends to determine where you go with what you think we should do about offshore wind. And so I said, no, we can't have this discussion without talking about politics. That's not quite true, but the default setting is people are going to go to that political brain because in our society, we're like so immersed in politics these days. But there are things you can do, ways you can structure a conversation, ways that you can structure an engagement to try to get people to slow down, to kind of recognize those biases, recognize some of that automatic thinking, set it aside and kind of talk through the issues in a more deliberative manner. That's where there's a little more possibility across political difference, but it's hard work and it takes people who are really committed to that type of engagement.
So just as a follow-up, and I know you're not a politician, but
Thank
I
God.
have to imagine maybe the positive side of me thinking is that when we actually get into the legislature and we start debating these topics, that more rational brain comes in. Is that true?
That the politicians themselves are
Yeah,
engaging in
like
that.
to me, the way I see it is like, the automatic brain is during the campaigning process, but at some point you have to legislate and govern, and that requires a more rational brain. I don't know if
I
that's
think,
even within your purview, but I'm
I
thinking when
mean,
it comes to sustainability.
I definitely think there are folks who are out there who try to make these conversations happen. And I think, we used to do a little more bipartisanship. At the federal level, there's very little of it. I think at the state level, we can still sometimes see that. Certainly at the local level, we see more bipartisanship, right? And so I think there definitely are a lot of staffers, a lot of folks working on these issues who are trying to, have those back and forths and talk through these issues. But you said, once we get to the legislature, we're away from that campaign. But how long are we till that next campaign starts? Not that far, right? And
Right.
so it's tough to get out of that cycle. I do think there's more of an opportunity at the state and local level, but our politics have gotten so nationalized in the last 20 years. Our political media is very nationalized. Our political conversation is so driven by the president and the Senate at any given time that it makes it tough. But it's possible. You just got to work for it. You just got to work for it. And you got to kind of demand it of your elected officials. And if you're working in those domains of yourself and of your colleagues.
So, kind of switching gears, but not really, because it does circle back to local politics. Recently in the media, there's been a lot of discussion in coastal communities about microplastics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've all learned that there are microplastics produced every day on construction sites. And in coastal communities, it's important to have some sort of containment of that.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the communities have been doing their part in, passing laws to say, okay, these are the measures that contractors need to take, whether it's a hood attachment or tarps, whatever it may be. But I guess the challenge might be communication,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's to the contractors or even to local officials. Do you have anything to add to that or even words of advice?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that come to mind. One is if we're trying to get contractors to take action on these kinds of issues, there's a field of study called social marketing and health communication that I do some work in. And one of the big insights there is, if there's a behavior you're trying to promote, trying to encourage, there's two things you really should try to do. One is decrease the barriers to those behaviors, and the other is increase the incentives to those behaviors, right? And so make it make it such that it's not hard for them to do the thing you want them to do. So I don't know, on this, I'm not an expert in this specific issue, right? But you talked about, particular kinds of hoods they could be using, right? Well, where do they get those hoods? I don't know the answer, but what I would say is let's make it as easy as possible for them to get those hoods. If I were working in local government, I would probably say we should be investing in getting those hoods to those contractors, paying for them, right? Or finding some way to get them to them. Make it as easy as possible so they won't be able to say, hey, I have this big barrier, I can't get the hood, it doesn't fit, it costs too much, et cetera, right? The other piece is how do we increase the benefits? How do we create some incentives here? What do they get out of it, right? One is they know that they're doing something good for the world, but that might not necessarily always be the best motivator. So can we figure out some other motivator? Can there be a environmentally conscious contractor of the year? An award for somebody who goes above and beyond, right? People really do respond sometimes to small things like that. And so that's big picture, on that contractor level, for instance, how do we decrease the barriers? How do we increase the benefits of the behavior we're trying to get them to do? We can also, if we want to stop them from doing the behavior that we don't want them to do, right, which is to stop them from releasing these microplastics, we can also increase those barriers, right, which is, are there negative ramifications? Is there enforcement? Are there other ways as well that we can change social norms? That's another big piece. If one contractor feels like they're the only one doing this, they might not be motivated to do it. How do we get a collective group to say, hey, we're going in on this together. right? We think this is important. How do we get leaders in that community? Maybe it's political leaders, maybe it's leaders from the business or contractor community. The power of social norms is another really fundamental insight from communication and psychology. So how do you leverage things like social norms, things like increasing the benefits of that behavior, decreasing the barriers that you want to see, and maybe we can, make some progress on this important issue down the shore.
Garrett, did you do any work or research about the plastic bag ban in New Jersey? I mean, that seems something that's playing right into what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, I think the plastic bag bans are an interesting example, of there is the question of whether the plastic bag bans actually achieve their goal. I think that there's a lot of conflicting data on that specifically in terms of like the environmental impact of of all these reusable bags that people end up having. I don't know about you, but I have like a giant bag of bags with a million reusable bags. And so there is actually this question of like, is it ultimately better for the environment in the way that we do this? But definitely some of those similar principles are in place, right? And that's why they sell reusable bags right at checkout, right? And that's why there is a cost to the use of a plastic bag. I would say that 10 cents, I think it is in New Jersey, right, to get the plastic bag. I don't know that that's a big enough barrier to really stop that behavior. And I also think there are ways that we could make the use of those recyclable bags easier, right? And so, what if there were a way to recycle those recycled bags at the store itself, right? Because I don't know about you, but I often show up at the store and I forgot the bag, right? So I got to get another one, right? So I think there are ways that this well-intentioned policy, I'm not sure it has achieved all of the goals. I'm not a super expert on it, but just knowing, because this has happened in other places across the country too. But those are things I think we could use these principles as well of social marketing and of persuasion to figure out how do we get this right? Because I'm not sure it's achieving all the policy and environmental goals it initially set out to do.
Interesting. Okay. We're going to take another brief break here. We'll come on back for our third segment here with Garrett Broad.
Welcome back. You're watching Tidal Flooding Talk, and we're brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, who would like to remind our viewers to protect natural floodplains. Floodplains like salt marshes and stream beds are nature's way of managing floodwaters while improving the environment. Help them do their job. Reduce boat speeds to minimize erosion, use fertilizers sparingly to protect water quality, and limit hard surfaces in your yard so rainwater can absorb naturally. A little effort goes a long way to protect your community.
Awesome. All right, so we are back. Last go around here with Garrett Broad, talking about a lot of good things, sustainability and otherwise here. So what are some projects that you're working on now? Anything real exciting in the sustainability world that you're doing?
Yeah, so one, I should just say I'm at Rowan University, which is this growing, booming university. I grew up in the area, and it was a small teaching school of 5,000 students or so, and now we're well over 20,000 students. We've got multiple med schools. We've got a vet school that's opening officially. And so one of the things I do is I just try to bring people together. And so this doesn't always come out in publications or anything like that, but I try to organize people. I try to bring people together, and we've just seen such a cool collection of brilliant people at the university come together on all sorts of sustainability related projects, from stuff around glass recycling in Glassboro to climate change related research and coastal research. I'm working on some other projects related to agriculture, urban agriculture, precision agriculture, the role of AI and drones in ways to better understand our agricultural system. I also am doing some interesting work around healthy food access in southern New Jersey. Starting to develop a partnership with a project in Salem, the city of Salem, where they're building a grocery store, and we're trying to figure out how to kind of make that as impactful as possible. So I got too many projects. I also do a bunch of stuff around animal agriculture and debates about meat and vegetarianism and meat alternatives. So I got too many projects, to be perfectly honest. But it's an exciting time to be working in anything related to sustainability, the environment, and especially at Rowan, where they've been super supportive of this work.
Now, over the last 10 years, obviously there has been a lot more social media usage, even in, meteorology and
Definitely.
floodplain management, you name it, environmental studies, everything comes out through social media.
Mm-hmm.
As a communication scholar, what do you think the greatest, the pros and cons are of having social media out there?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a central question for anybody who's interested in any sort of, scientific communication, environmental communication. What do we think of these digital and social media tools? And, their strength are their reach, the ability for fast communication, outreach to so many different people, the ability to kind of go outside of a legacy media infrastructure and build your own audience and brand. The downsides are exactly the same, right? That folks, anybody can do that, and it doesn't always incentivize good information. It doesn't always incentivize quality evidence. And so I think we're all, continuing to try to grapple with the amazing possibilities that these tools give to us. They're constantly changing too, from one year to the next. A new platform comes in and becomes the dominant one. None of us knew what TikTok was, 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? But now it's, the main thing that young people are on. And I can tell you, as somebody who's been teaching young people in colleges for a long time now, there will be some other platform that we haven't heard of in another couple years that comes along. And so it's that reach, it's that speed, that's the strength. It's also the biggest danger. And I think anybody who's interested in science, environment, climate, coastal communication, you have to work with those tools, but also be mindful of some of the downsides of them at the same time.
I think you answered it perfectly, and I could have a whole nother episode with you about social media and the generations of social media as we go forward. Yeah. But that's not the time for this. But it is the time for the one thing we can't stop thinking about, coastal flooding or otherwise. Garrett, we're going to toss it over to you.
Oh, wow. I start. Yeah, I mean, I'd say the one thing that I can't stop thinking about, to be perfectly honest, I'm potty training my 2-year-old right now.
Okay.
And I it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So, I mean, she's doing good. But if you're asking me honestly, like what's on my mind right now, and you said it didn't have to be about coastal flooding, that's actually what's on my mind right now. So we're making progress, but holy moly, this is stressful. But we're rooting her on. I can hear her screaming in the other room right now. So yeah, if you've got any tips, anybody with kids out there, let me know. Hopefully by the time you see this, we'll have made this happen, and she's in good shape.
You could have said holy something else.
When did she turned 2? Because I have a 2-year-old, and we kind of started that whole potty training thing, but I keep just thinking I have more time, and
she's like approaching 2.5. So she's
okay.
She's 2 and 5 months. So we tried it a little earlier. It did not go well. We took a breather, and now we're back and we're having a little more progress this time.
All right. Well, you'll have to let me know how it goes, because my daughter turned 2 in April. So
okay.
She just turned 2, so I feel like I'm like not behind, but I do need to get started on that very soon.
Good luck.
Is potty training on your mind too, Palma?
Now it is.
Now it
It's
is.
definitely on my mind. What about you, Joe? What do you got?
Nothing potty related, but Garrett brought up something. So the precision ag with drones. So I am a commercial drone pilot. I actually teach a drone class. I'm an adjunct at Kane. And I watched this really cool video from Wendover Productions. It's a YouTube channel. They do some great work and about precision drones and ag and how much it actually it reduces the amount of pesticides used or water used, and just how like down to the millimeter they get in terms of making sure they can maximize an acre of land with the best yield. And it's just really incredible. I don't know. I thought it was just really incredible, the amount of productivity, and it kind of just bigger picture. I'm more of like an optimist when it comes to the future. I think there's a word for that. I can't think of it, but like, I always feel like there's always going to be some kind of job or sector or market that's going to replace a market that was left behind. And just hearing about this ag just makes me, and the drones and the ag just is like one small thing. Maybe Gary, you could talk a little more about it. We got another 30 seconds.
No, I have a colleague who's doing some really cool work around that. We had a conference recently, a guy named Hugh Wynn with some folks at Rutgers and elsewhere, bringing folks together around the state of New Jersey to figure out like AI, drones, ag, all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of potential. The kind of path to commercialization is still really challenging, and how to get these tools to actually really work for the farmers. The tools are there, the technology is there, but like, how do these actually work in a way that they make sense for farmers to put into practice? That's the big challenge to see. We need to clear some hurdles.
Well, hopefully good things come in the future. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. That, like it usually does every week, went by faster than I thought it would. But Garrett, we really appreciate you coming on and coming on to Tidal Flooding Talk. We'll have a new episode for you next Tuesday. Make sure if you want to buy Garrett's book, you certainly can. It's called More Than Just Food, Food Justice and Community Change. And we'll be with you back next week. Thank you very much, Garrett. We appreciate the time.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.